ghosted me after I playfully mocked him as weak and that he should watch me in the corner. Hello Reddit, my name is Zara and I'm 26 years old. I need your advice on something I did. I know it's horrible what I did, but I really need advice on how to get him back. The thing is, my fiancé ghosted me after I playfully mocked him as weak and told him he should watch me in the corner. I know it was a terrible thing to say, but I was angry and I wanted to hurt him with my words. Evidently, I chose the wrong choice of words, as now he won't even take my calls or return them. My parents have been calling and asking after him, and I don't even know what to tell them because our wedding is in 2 weeks, and now I don't even know where or how to reach him. You see, I met Jason at a masquerade party. Normally, I wasn't even supposed to be at the party, but my friends forced me there, knowing I don't go out, and they wanted me to have some fun, even if it was a one-time thing. I went to the party feeling out of place and awkward because everyone wore masks and yet seemed to know each other, but I could barely point out my friends in the dancing crowd. So I sat at the bar, sipping my drink and hoping the party would come to an end soon enough so I could go back home and back to my books. Yes, I was a bookworm, and as a medical student, I had to be so I wouldn't fail. My own idea of fun was lying on my comfy cushion in my dorm, sipping my favorite drink and scanning through a medical journal. So I definitely felt the urge to leave that party as soon as possible. A man in a green mask had walked up to me and sat beside me. His name was Jason, my present fiancé who has now ghosted me and refuses to speak to me. He didn't say anything to me at first, and just ordered a glass of wine and sipped it too. We sat in comfortable silence. Well, that was until I felt eyes on me, and I turned and saw him staring at me through his mask. When he realized I had caught him staring, he laughed and raised his hands in surrender, apologizing for staring too hard. I shrugged, and then we started to talk. We spoke randomly, but I enjoyed every bit of the conversation. So when it was time to go, we exchanged contacts and kept in touch. We became very good friends, and because we had similar interests, conversations between us flowed easily. Sometimes we would speak for hours before even realizing we were. We started meeting up sometimes for lunch or dinner to discuss whatever it was we couldn't do on the phone. Jason was the sweetest guy I knew. He was gentle, kind, very handsome, and fit physically too. He even had a good sense of humor. Well, most people wouldn't call it a good sense of humor because they weren't exactly funny. But to a book nerd like myself, who managed to snatch herself a boy's attention, they were definitely funny. Jason was a shy person and sometimes could be very indecisive, so it took him a whole 3 months before he confessed his feelings for me, and another 3 to officially ask me to be his girl. I figured if I wanted Jason to do certain things, I had to hint very strongly at them before he got them. Don't get me wrong, Jason was book smart, and he became a successful technologist after we were done with college. But in relationships, Jason didn't do things randomly except you'd have hinted at them for a while before he got it. One time, I had wanted him to get me a car so it would make transportation for me easier to and from the hospital. So I started to discuss cars and even went ahead to take him to racing games while telling him how lovely it would be to own one. It took Jason a full month to understand what I was hinting at before he eventually got me my dream car. After med school, my original plan was to get married before I started training to be a medical doctor, but Jason wasn't getting the hints. By the time I had graduated from med school, he had already started up his business and was already quite successful. He had even bought a house and his own car, so I knew that getting married wasn't exactly the problem here, but Jason not being able to read the signs. By that time, we were already 3 years into our relationship, and I felt like it was time to take things forward. But Jason didn't seem to think so because he was too busy trying to do other things to make me happy, rather than the very obvious thing I wanted almost desperately. Wait, I wasn't exactly desperate, but the thing is, when you look at your parents' legacy, you kind of want to live up to it because somehow you wanted to tell your own kids how you did the same as their grandparents did. Does that make sense? Either way, that was what I wanted. You see, my parents were married at the age of 22, and according to them, they had met and liked each other instantly, like I did with Jason. They dated for just 6 months before they got married, and now they still live happily together and are as in love as the young adults they were many years ago. So my parents made me believe in love don't wait around and don't waste time. So dating someone, even someone I loved, for 3 years was sort of a big deal for me, especially since all my siblings were happily married, and I was the only unmarried one amongst them. Funnily, nobody minded all these things I was seeing and was thinking as uncomfortable truths. But at that point, I had thought they were seeing them, and that bothered me more. I loved Jason very much, in fact, but I just wanted him to do the right thing, and I was getting frustrated by it. Sometimes I would even snap at him when he didn't understand what I meant. And Jason, being Jason, would try as much as possible to please me, buy me expensive gifts, take me out on dates. I loved when he did those things, but I just wasn't appreciative of them, and I took them all for granted. So I began to focus more on my career as a doctor. I resigned myself to the fact that I might always just have a boyfriend and not a husband. I was getting too desperate to get married. I was beginning to lose myself, so I gave up on the idea. Because as much as I wanted to get married, I only wanted it with Jason. So work made me even happier. The emergencies, attending to different patients, and putting a smile on their faces after getting them relieved of their pains. And also sometimes when it would be the opposite. I got really busy with work, so I started to see less and less of Jason. Mostly because I was too tired most times to even hold a conversation with him. Our hospital was short of doctors because one of the doctors had to take maternity leave, and another one traveled for a seminar, so I was literally the only one available, so I got really, really busy. Well, that was until a new doctor was transferred to our hospital. It was a relief because I knew I would have broken down anytime soon if another doctor didn't start working at the hospital. Mason was really nice and took off the workload from me, so I was almost back to my usual not too busy period. All the times I was busy, though, Jason was very understanding. In fact, he would bring me lunch, sometimes dinner, because I would forget to eat while I worked. So he was really supportive of my career, and I loved that about him. Well, that was until I decided to ruin things for myself. One time, I volunteered to go on a mission work. Mission work was like when we traveled to another state or country where they desperately needed medical attention, but because no doctors were willing to live there due to the weather conditions or poor living conditions, they tended to get killed by even the slightest illness. But I honestly didn't do it because I was good or for humanity's sake. I did it because I knew if I went and came back, I would get more chances of being promoted to TOD, Chief of Department of Gynecology, and that alone was able to make me desperate to seize that opportunity. I knew that Jason mostly worked at home, despite having his own company building. According to him, he's able to build things faster when he's in his own comfortable space, which apparently was at home. So I asked him to come with me on my mission work, but Jason came up with silly excuses not to come with me. I was angry for some reason, and I left without even saying goodbye. I know I wasn't supposed to get angry because I had mostly refused to go with him on his travels to tech seminars or launches. In fact, I had been less of a supportive girlfriend, but in my head at that moment, all I saw was a man who didn't want to support or encourage me. All through my stay at the mission, which was almost a month, I didn't return Jason's calls or text messages. They annoyed me so much that I just ended up blocking his number at some point. I know. I regret those stupid decisions now. It was during my 1-month mission work that I met Chris. Chris is an engineer who is a humanitarian and decided to give up his world to come there and help them construct better buildings to fight off their very strong weather. In fact, I had expected very little from them when I was going there. I thought all I'd see were a bunch of weathered houses battered by the natural disasters that hit them like plagues. I was planning to live out of my suitcase in case I couldn't cope anymore and wanted to run away. What I saw wasn't what was described to me, though, so I was quite surprised and amazed by the town. The town respected Chris so much and revered him that even when I came as their new doctor, they had brought me to Chris. Originally, I had been pissed because I had expected them to actually treat me like a small god since I was there to save their lives. But when I eventually got to find out why Chris was revered so much, I was impressed. I was more than impressed. In fact, I wanted to prove my worth by throwing my weight around. I didn't mean literally. I just wanted to show them that I came to do good too, even though I had other priorities in mind when I first went there. So I started working hard, starting by helping the children with measles vaccines. Soon enough, the people started to come to me for advice on even the tiniest things they should have knowledge about. It was crazy how people could live in the 21st century and still not know basic things that didn't exactly require a doctor to understand. I wasn't comfortable with them around, but I kept my smile on my face and my voice light whenever I chided them about not knowing basic things to do in case of emergencies that especially didn't require hospitals to solve them. I started holding small meetings, which had literally all of them turning up, to sensitize them about basic medical knowledge, and I even trained about 3 of them on how to do CPR. Chris was definitely impressed with the work I did and started to hang around me more. I enjoyed his company too much more than I would have wanted to admit, and everyone in that town seemed to think we looked good together, so they tried their very obvious efforts to bring us together all the time. Chris was such a fun person to be around, and despite not having been in the outside world for the longest time, he still kept in touch, and he clearly looked like someone who knew what he was doing. I won't lie to you guys. I was starting to feel a little more than liking having him around because I started to want to be around him, and when he wasn't there, I found myself thinking about him too much. Whenever I thought about Jason and how I left our relationship sour, I felt guilty having those kinds of feelings, but I just couldn't help myself, especially since, in fact, Chris showed interest in me and wasn't particularly hiding his emotions. Despite what you might have thought, I didn't sleep with Chris during my 1-month stay, even though it was one thing on my mind throughout. Somehow, I wanted to respect what I had with Jason, even though I was obviously ruining things between us by behaving badly toward him. My last week of staying there, I spent more time with Chris than I ever had. It had been torture seeing the object of my infatuation right in front of me and not being able to do anything. He tried to, but I resisted. Barely, but I still did. So I came back home feeling out of place and sexually frustrated, especially missing Chris. But I thought it best because I didn't want to have to deal with a complicated relationship. And then there was Jason to think of. As soon as I got home, Jason was already there, obviously waiting for my arrival. I was so tired that I hadn't said anything to him, just went to my room and freshened up. I hadn't even bothered to eat anything and just went to sleep, tired from the journey. Luckily for me, I had been given a week's break to rest up from the whole thing. When I woke up that day, it was late in the evening, and since I woke up hungry, I went to the kitchen to whip something up for myself. But Jason had been there, and there was a food plate covered in front of him while he typed on his phone. I knew he was working, and I knew the food was probably for me, so I just took it and ate hungrily. By the time I was done, Jason had dropped his phone, and he apologized for not going with me, and explained why he hadn't gone with me. His excuses were reasonable, but I didn't want to have to apologize for my own behavior of ignoring him for a month over something so silly, so I just shrugged and accepted his apology without giving any of mine. Jason was happy I had at least forgiven him and was explaining how hard it was for him since I left and refused to speak to him. I felt really guilty because I had not really thought of him while there. My mind had been on someone else, and that someone was specifically Chris, but my pride refused to let me apologize. I resumed work the following week after Jason spent the last one making up for the whole month we missed. I was happy that we made up, but I was in for my greatest surprise when 2 days after I had resumed working, I was told someone wanted to see me. Me thinking it was Jason as usual, didn't bother asking questions and went to the lobby. I thought Jason was just bringing me lunch, but on reaching there, it hadn't been Jason, it was Chris. I was really surprised to see him. I didn't think he could leave those people behind. I didn't have much time to question him because I had to get back to work, so I left him, and since I was finishing work early that day, I agreed to dinner with him. We had dinner together that evening, and he told me how he missed me, had to come see me, and didn't want my trip down there to just be the end of our relationship. I didn't know what to do, whether I should give into my heart and go with the flow, or my brain was telling me something different. Up until then, I hadn't told Chris that I had a boyfriend. I mean, I had hinted at it, but probably seeing that no one called me worried about how I was doing, which was initially my fault, as I had blocked Jason from calling, he thought otherwise. So he was here trying to work something between us. I was so tempted to take his offer to have a fling. So tempted I eventually did. I know. But it's one thing for your head to think one thing and your body another. I started hanging out with Chris more and more when I wasn't busy with work, meaning I spent less time with Jason. I gave Jason excuses of being busy at work, and Jason, of course, fell for all my lies, hook, line, and sinker, because he evidently loved me and trusted me. I felt guilty actually two-timing, but I didn't want what I had with Chris to end. It was exciting and fun, and I felt like a teenager doing what she isn't supposed to be doing. And what I had with Jason was rock solid. I didn't want that to end too. I mean, I did love him. Fast forward to when Jason proposed to me. I almost got caught that day with all my lies. I had never felt so anxious in all my life. Jason had actually planned to propose to me during my usual 1-hour lunch break, and of course I didn't know that because I spent less time with him to know what he was doing most of the time. I had planned to spend that lunch break with Chris, and he had come to pick me up and take me to my favorite restaurant where I ate all the time. Jason had called, and I couldn't ignore it, so I picked up. When he asked where I was, I told him I was with someone having lunch at my usual place. I honestly wasn't expecting him to show up, particularly not with a flower and a ring in his hand. I had been so shocked when he asked me to turn around, and there he was, on one knee with a sparkly ring resting in its case and flowers in his other hand. Chris was right there, looking at me confused and totally speechless. By then, people's attention was already drawn towards us, and I couldn't leave him on his knees, so I just nodded weakly. The congratulations and applause from every corner of the place from strangers when Jason slipped the ring onto my finger had me smiling like I was pleased, while I was panicking inside. Chris still sat there looking at us, and I knew what was going on in his head would probably be to squeeze the life out of me for lying. Well, I didn't exactly lie since I technically told him I was in a relationship, but I guess that's also lying. Chris eventually stood up and extended his hand while congratulating Jason. Jason was evidently happy and didn't question who I was meeting, so he expressed his thanks, and Chris excused himself and, in his words, left the happy couple to enjoy their moment. I knew he was mad at me, but I couldn't even go after him then to explain things to him. Jason finally did the one thing I'd wanted for so long, but it had to be when Chris was there. I was happy, but I wasn't entirely happy, so I quickly excused myself 10 minutes later with the excuse that I had to get back to work. At work, I was anxious, especially when I texted Chris, and he didn't respond to any of my texts. Later that evening, I had been with Jason to celebrate our engagement at my place, and he was asking me about my friend, who I was having lunch with when he proposed. I had lied that he was a long-term friend with whom we lost contact, and he recently moved here, and we were just having a harmless lunch to catch up. Jason had believed me and even wanted to meet with him another time, as according to him, he didn't really get to talk to him, as he had been more interested in getting alone time with me then. Well, fortunately, or should I say unfortunately now, the next day was my day off. Jason knew that and had expected we would spend time together, but I lied that I wanted to go see my parents to give them the good news, but instead went to see Chris. When I got there, I was trying to explain my part in everything, but Chris wasn't even listening and just kissed me. The kiss was different this time. We've shared a few kisses before, but they were usually pecks on the lips compared to how he kissed me then, and they usually never ended in anything else. But this time I had sex with Chris, and according to Chris, he didn't mind that I was engaged to be married. He just wanted me, and that was all. I suppose I should have run the opposite way then, but I was too happy that Chris accepted continuing our relationship, and I didn't mind anything at that point. Chris and I continued our relationship. I felt guilty, though, because I knew how hurt Jason would feel if he found out, but I couldn't help myself. It was like my desire was controlling my every decision. Even when Jason was starting to ask when we could have our wedding, I gave excuses because I couldn't imagine having to cheat on him in marriage. It felt like it would be a deadly sin, even more than the one I was already committing against him. I started getting scared when Chris started getting bolder with our relationship. He would come pick me up for lunch and also pick me up after work. Literally everyone at my workplace knew I was engaged, but didn't know to whom exactly, seeing 2 different guys with me. I started getting more worried and told Chris about it. He had said then that he loved me and just wanted to spend more time with me. Then I felt special and didn't question his intentions further, until Chris had needed an urgent loan. He said that he wanted to expand and needed workers and money to do that. But the bank had rejected his application for a loan, and he was feeling pretty down. I didn't know what to do because even if I had combined my savings together, I couldn't give him up to the amount he was looking for. Chris suggested I ask Jason for the money. I was hesitant at first because I knew Jason knew I couldn't ask for such an amount for any project, as I had never discussed any with him, and if I told him I was asking for a friend, he might get suspicious, and I didn't want that because I did love Jason and didn't want to lose him. Chris kept insisting I ask Jason for the money, but I didn't know exactly how to go about it. I was anxious about Jason finding out about my relationship with Chris. He had almost caught us one time when he was outside for work meeting a client. Meanwhile, I was with Chris on a date when I had lied to Jason when he had called earlier that day that I would be visiting my parents. So he had seen us holding hands and laughing together, and before I even realized Jason was there, it had been too late to hide, so I had smiled nervously, and when he asked what we were doing there, I was still trying to come up with something when Chris came to my rescue. He had lied that he was there with his girlfriend, who he actually wanted to introduce to me, but the girlfriend had excused herself to use the bathroom, and that was why she wasn't there with us. Jason had accepted our excuses, but I was sure he had his doubts. So asking for a loan on Chris's behalf was definitely going to make him more suspicious. But then again, Chris wasn't letting it go and kept insisting I did try my luck. So I eventually did as he asked, and I asked Jason for a loan. Jason was surprised, especially because of the amount I was asking for, and when I told him it was for a friend, he asked what it was for exactly, and I told him. But when he kept asking more questions, I told him it was for Chris, the friend he saw me with. Immediately, Jason had changed. He had been willing at first to consider the loan, but once he had known who it was for exactly, he blatantly refused to give him the loan. I was very angry. Perhaps I shouldn't have been in the first place because I know Jason had every right to decide not to give a loan out of his personal money, but at that moment, I was just so angry and said some things that I didn't exactly mean, but I just wanted to hurt him with my words. So I had first tried guilt-tripping him by saying it was because I didn't have that much money to lend Chris, which was why I came to him. When I realized that wasn't working and Jason was still adamant and maintained his stand, I became so violent with my words and called him a weak man, and that he should definitely watch me in the corner and see whether or not I would raise the funds Chris needed. It was at that very point Jason got so angry and spoke to me angrily. According to him, Jason, he had discovered I was cheating on him long before he proposed to me, but because he loved me and didn't want to lose me, he kept silent about it and even proposed to me, thinking that if I was at least committed to him by marriage, I would stop the affair and focus on him. But then I had decided to rub the relationship in his face by continuing my affair with Chris, and then I even came to ask for a loan for my lover. I was speechless after everything he said. I couldn't believe my ears. Jason had known about my affair with Chris. Jason, at that point, when he saw how speechless I was, said that he was indeed weak for allowing me to walk all over him, but he certainly wasn't going to sit around in the corner and watch me rub my affair right in his face. I couldn't say anything because I knew that at that moment I was doomed. Jason just walked out of my apartment and never came back again. I tried calling and begging him, but it was like anything that was of Jason had disappeared from town. I couldn't find him at his usual hideout or his apartment, and when I eventually got time off work to go to his office, this was a week after the fight we had, Jason was nowhere in the building, and if what his workers said was to be believed, he traveled, and they didn't know where to. I was pretty sure they knew where he was, but were probably too scared to lose their jobs, so they kept their mouths shut. I couldn't find Jason anywhere, and Chris too did a number on me. He told me how happy he was that things ended like that between Jason and me, and he couldn't be happier that we were finally going to be together. After he persuaded me to, I gave him all my savings and even borrowed a loan from the bank, using my apartment as mortgage, so I could obtain the loan and give it to him. Now I'm in debt because Chris is MIA and took all my money with him. I don't know what to do honestly because now all I have left are debts to pay and possibly no apartment to come back to if I don't pay it all up. My parents don't even know things with Jason have ended. Jason has totally ghosted me, and now I don't even know what to do. I really do love Jason, and I know I wronged him terribly, but I really am sorry for what I did to him. Please, I need your advice on what to do. How do I get back my life and relationship with Jason? Please help me. Update. Hello, Reddit. It's been 3 whole months now since I ruined my own life with my own hands. I know I came here to express myself and how I'm feeling and see whether I would get advice that would perhaps help me get back my relationship with Jason. But so far, all I've gotten have been backlashes and insults. I know what I did was bad, and I could have lied about what I did when I came to tell my story, but I wanted to bear my heart out, and perhaps someone would understand the decisions I made, however stupid they were, and would give me insights on how to go about everything, especially getting back Jason. But that was evidently not the case. The comments made me feel worse than I already felt. And another bad thing happened. My parents stopped speaking to me after they found out what happened between Jason and me. They don't even mind that I'm their only child and refuse to talk to me. I only told them because I knew Jason still spoke to them, but now they are refusing to even speak to me, let alone speak to Jason on my behalf. I wish so much that I hadn't met Chris or even decided to have him as my lover. If Chris hadn't... No, actually, I did that by myself. If I hadn't fallen so easily... Maybe if I had tried my hardest to push Chris away and not turned into his hands because I thought at that point, if I hadn't, I would have missed out on a sweet relationship. Maybe then I'd have my whole life ahead of me and not this dark, debt-filled future I seem to have now. I regret everything I did so much and wish I could turn back the hands of time and undo everything. I realize that I've made a huge mistake. I have thrown away a long-term relationship for a fleeting infatuation. Now I'm left waiting and wondering how I could have been so stupid to have lost the love of my life forever. Was my desire for excitement and passion worth risking everything? From where I'm standing, it didn't look like it. I really wish I could have done things differently, not becoming so desperate for a marriage that I frustrated Jason and then went ahead to have an affair. And I'm not sure I can ever forgive myself for what I've done. I thought I was seeking excitement and passion, but in reality, I was destroying the love and future Jason and I could have built together. Every day, I'm reminded of what I've lost. Jason's smiles, his laughter, and his loving embrace, all gone. His gentle encouragement when work got too tough, his soft reminder to eat, and him always being there for me are now replaced by the harsh reality of my own making. I'm left to pick up the pieces of my shattered heart and wonder what could have been if only I had been true. If only I had appreciated what we had. I took advantage of Jason's love and mistook it for weakness, and I did the worst thing I could have ever done to him. I wish so badly that I could go back and change everything, but life obviously doesn't offer do-overs, and now I'm left to face the consequences of my actions. Life seems like it isn't worth living if I don't have Jason. I cannot bear being alone all through this world because I couldn't even make the necessary efforts to keep what I had. I'm lost in the what-ifs, forever questioning the choices I made. What if I had been honest? What if I had been true? What if I had appreciated what we had? But then again, I'm reminded that life doesn't offer do-overs, and I'm forever stuck with questions and regrets in my head. Crazy how blinded you can be to one thing that should matter to you, and then when you lose it, you see clearly. I mean, it's true what they say about not appreciating what you have till you lose it. I still cannot comprehend just how stupid I was to think I could do those things to Jason and get away with them. I don't even need a doctor now to tell me how depressed I am. It almost started affecting my work because I nearly killed a patient by administering the wrong treatment. It was decided by the board of hospital directors that I was suspended for a month so I could get myself together. That was the worst decision because now all I can do is stare at the walls in my room and be reminded of all the stupid decisions I made to bring me here. I really am alone with nothing but debts. Update. Hello Reddit, this is my last post here. I'm grateful that I got to express myself here even despite the backlash. At least I was able to express my feelings, all of them, and it helped just a little. I'm still regretful of the things I've done, the decisions I made, and how badly it eventually turned out. Jason still refuses to talk to me, and my parents also see no reason to talk to a daughter they clearly didn't raise the way she turned out. I'm still all alone. Oh, Chris contacted me. Not how you think he did, though. He sent me a text to tell me he was back in his home, which I evidently don't know where it is, and he wanted to let me know that he was no thief, But the money he took from me was collateral damage, as I apparently hurt his feelings and embarrassed him when he discovered I was actually in a serious relationship with someone. So he decided to have some sort of sick revenge by doing what he did. I wanted to plead with him to even send half of the money back so I could pay some of the bank loan I acquired, but he blocked my number immediately after sending me the text. I regret everything so much because now I evidently lost my relationship with Jason over some stupid revenge Chris wanted to have by playing me and also leaving me with debts. I'm so embarrassed and filled with guilt as I write this because everything I did was for some stupid reason, and now I've lost everything. I cannot even forgive myself for how I treated Jason, so I know even asking him for forgiveness is overrated. How I wish I had done everything differently. The bank has been calling and telling me my mortgage would soon be collected if I refused to pay. I would, but I don't even have any money to do so. I'm so thoroughly doomed. Guys, please don't make the same mistakes I did. For everything eventually, at the end, wasn't worth the risk I took to follow my heart. Thanks, and goodbye.